Welcome into another episode of Odd Man Rush. Hope you're all having a great week. I'm Will Highland, of course, joined by Kyle Diezel as always. We have a different show. There's not a lot of NHL news to talk about because the NHL hasn't been on for 2 weeks. I think we had one game over the weekend, maybe a couple games for some teams. So we don't have much NHL news to talk about. So we're gonna stick our nose into back into the Four Nations, dive into what happened, what didn't happen, and some takeaways from that, and then we are officially on Ovechkin watch, so we will get to that at the end of the show as well. But Kyle, how are you? And can we get a weather report?
I'm doing all right. Been busy with work. Work has been crazy, especially with mass vacation week last week. For those who don't know what it is, all high schools are on vacation in Massachusetts all last week. So since I work at college admissions, they're coming to visit me. So all day dealing with college kids and families. Weather report. I think it was our first spring day of the year. It literally felt like spring. I went on a run today. Felt wonderful. Supposed to be in the mid to low 50s on Wednesday. So I'm excited. The Leafs turning over. So I'm excited. No snow in the forecast, which is great.
Yeah, so you're gonna get your swim trunks on and head up to Rye Beach, is
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing. Um, yeah, I agree. It's been good. G Walked outside yesterday, felt good, felt normal. I think school vacation week, which is the same up here in Maine, I think that is a little bit of a turning point for winter because by the time that's over, you're almost to March, and then March, sometimes you get a storm here or there, but you are turning the corner
Mhm.
into spring. I'd say that we've turned the corner and you're a track athlete, you're heading into that last 100 meters of the 400. That's kind of how I look at it here with winter. And yeah, we were absolutely dumped with snow ever since MLK Day. So the last 5 weeks, in New England, we just got dumped with snow in a way that I haven't seen in like a decade. So I'm glad that hopefully that's behind us. But yes, um, plenty of good things happening. I believe I might be coming down with a cold. So let's hope that I don't get the same cold bug or whatever that affected some of the Four Nations.
Ooh.
And the Four Nations face off, for those of you who also may not know, um, although I'm pretty sure all of our roster, or all of our roster, geez, our listeners know about that because we've been talking about that for a while. That happened over this February period, and it coincided with the school breaks and with the middle of the month, and so while the schools have been on a little bit of a break, so has the NHL, and in its place was the Four Nations face-off. So, Kyle, how about you go first? Because, I don't want to take up too much of my breath here, talking about what I initially saw out of the Four Nations face-off. I do think it was a tremendous tournament. We'll talk about it, but what were your initial takeaways from the Four Nations?
First, let's give a shout out to you and I for predictions on who's going to win the Four Nations, and also predicting both games on past Saturday, and of not this past Saturday, but Saturday before, and Thursday of the whole thing of Team USA beating them for round one, losing the second time just shows that veterancy takes over. I think it just shows what people have been looking for in kind of this time and culture of what's going on in the world of a nation's pride. I know also if there's things going on in the world, especially geographically, especially if it deals with nations, you see the people become more passionate about what they're watching and what they're putting their attention forward. And I think Four Nations came at a time of a perfect time. There's no other way to put it. They also put the NBA All Star weekend to shame by I think what they have over 10 million views just on ESPN alone, which is the biggest watch of the NHL in decades, which is phenomenal for them. My overall reaction is the hype lived up to the expectation. We've been hyping it up for 2 years, as we talked about before. And this is, I think, a step forward for the NHL to help grow this brand a little bit. especially what PK Subban saying about the difference between how the NHL works with how players are passionate to play for their nation. Not saying NBA players aren't. There just isn't their passion to play in an All Star game. So, summarize everything else. Veterancy for Canada is what took over USA. USA also was dealing with a lot of bugs and viruses and injuries going on. However, Team Canada was as well, but it just shows that Sidney Crosby, a person who has never lost in this top tier stage, comes on top again thanks to Connor McDavid to cap it off. I think it also showed watching, for example, I was wondering what was going on with Jack Hughes, who seemed to have blown a flat tire a couple hundred times every game I watched. Not sure what's going on there. However, I do think Team USA did rely too heavily on their top two lines. They did not try to venture out into what's his name, Dylan Larkin, who was the leading scorer for the team. But also Kyle Connors barely saw the ice at times, and he's the leading scorer in the NHL right now. So I'm kind of questioning why we're not mixing them into the mix a little bit more. Goaltending I thought was phenomenal for us. No complaints there. Team Canada, they played a solid game all the way around. There's just no way you can hold them down forever. And I think having Charlie McAvoy out, especially with his matchup with McDavid, was kind of the matchup I was seeing the most attention to. And without him, we saw how less physical our defense was. We did also have two rookies play, I think, this final game, which is a little bit different for Team USA. So I think that showed a little bit there versus Canadian Stars, where the veteran wingers and centers helped those players progress a little bit more than Team USA did. But I think the MVP for us, like I talked about before, Brady Tkachuk, played phenomenal. I think this helps put him and the Sanders potentially making the playoff run this year. That's my take. Let's hear your take.
Yeah, so that's all. I agree with most of that. Um, I don't know where I want to start. I guess for those, we sort of buried the lead. The United States, there was that epic game on the 15th, the three fights in 9 seconds, the big goals from Larkin, as you mentioned, big performances from the Kachucks. They clinch a spot in Thursday's championship that happened on the 20th. In between, they had a game with Sweden where they kind of had to mail it in a little bit because they were dealing with a lot of injuries and they didn't have much to play for other than rest. I don't think that played a factor in Thursday's game. They still looked good on Thursday. So on Thursday, Canada wins in overtime after the United States trailed 1-0, took a 2-1 lead. Then Canada ties it late in the third, or late in the second, I should say, by Sam Bennett from the Panthers. And then in overtime, after a scoreless third period, it's Connor McDavid finding himself wide open in the slot, which not a great strategy defensively. Um, for the U.S. And that gives Canada the victory. And yeah, you and I were right. We thought Canada would win, um, and we thought they would split each other in the two matchups, and we thought you'd get a Canada USA final. So we were right about that. We were also right about how um, this was going to be an event that transcended normal hockey fans. You and I have talked for quite some time, dating it back at least a year and a half, if not a couple years or 3 years, how in order to get casual hockey fans or people that don't even follow hockey at all interested in the sport more, you had to have an international tournament with the best on best. And that's what happened, and that's what happened here in our country. Now we know in Canada, everybody was going to be interested, if you were a sports fan, was going to be interested in that tournament. We knew that going in. For the American fan base, it was a huge challenge to get everybody tuned in because the American sports fan, at least the hardcore one, generally ranks hockey third or fourth and generally tunes out from sports after the Super Bowl. So it was a big gamble. Um, for the NHL to do that. But I think it paid off because you had people who were tuning in because they wanted to watch sports, and as you pointed out, they were interested in the nationalism aspect of it. And for the NHL, who almost never gets involved in political things, to accidentally walk into this matchup with everything that's been talked about over the last couple months was a huge factor in this game. I I'm of the opinion that you don't need to augment this tournament because the hockey product was good enough that it doesn't need to be augmented by any political agenda. But at the same time, that helped get casuals interested in this game. So because the Canadians wanted to beat us and we wanted to beat them, and it's like a sibling rivalry. You shake hands at the end of the day. Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk play on the same team, right? Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner play on the same team. Um, but at the end of the day, this tournament delivered on all those aspects. The hockey product was good. The storylines were good, both the non-hockey and the hockey related ones. And and you got the matchup you wanted. Unfortunately for Sweden and Finland, I think Finland started out too slow. They had a good win over Sweden, but then they got blown out by Canada. You saw that their defense wasn't exactly where it needed to be. Sweden, although they beat the United States, who were decimated at the time, Sweden lost two one-goal games, and that was the difference for them. So, I do think this tournament has legs, it has juice, and I think it's something the NHL should um, continue to uh, continue to develop, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now, you mentioned some individual players, Kyle. I agree. I largely agree with you with the way the United States ran their team. I think Kyle Connor should have had a bigger role. I don't know what happened. I don't know why Sullivan decided to bench him for the championship game. I think Chris Kreider, Vincent Trocheck, JT Miller, and Adam Fox, all of whom play for the Rangers, all of whom had a mid to bad tournament uh, after coming from a mid to bad team. So from a team that was underperforming, which is the New York Rangers this year, and then you have a team like the USA who has four out of their 23 guys from the Rangers, and then those four tend to underperform in this tournament. Now I know Kreider got a goal against Sweden, and he wasn't terrible against Canada, but at the same time, Adam Fox didn't look good. JT Miller, his highlight was not punching Colton Parayko, I suppose. That was his highlight of the tournament.
Yep.
And Vincent Trocheck played pretty good against Finland, but he was kind of nowhere to be found the rest of the tournament. I think he was okay at penalty killing when I saw him, but like I needed more out of those guys. And then your guy, Jack Hughes. Look, I don't think this tournament was suited for a player like Jack Hughes. I think Jack Hughes, if he has a good year next year as well and makes the Olympic team, I think bigger ice will help him. Um, I think the game he relies a lot on his pure skill. Uh, the issue is his size and strength aren't necessarily there yet on an NHL rink with best on best. So I think he's still a very talented player, and he'll get a spot probably for Italy next winter. But that's what I'm looking at with Jack Hughes is his skill set. It just looked like he wasn't able to thrive because the environment wasn't really tailored to his ability. Now, because of his last name, he will probably make the tournament next year. As a player for the United States, considering a lot of the United States' centermen, other than Larkin and Matthews and Eichel, you're gonna need somebody else who's a pure center, and that's probably where Hughes is gonna fly in because, like, I think Miller's better off as a winger, for example. So those kind of players, and I think Trocheck might be better suited as a winger on a best on best roster. So that's where I'm looking at it from. I agree with you though. Like, do you think the United States should have added somebody like Tage Thompson to the roster based on what we saw in that championship game?
I don't. I think they could have. Yes, I think they could have. However, they needed one more injury for that to happen.
Well,
I
I mean before the tournament, like in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought Faber shouldn't have been there. I just didn't think he's had a good year. And like I said, some of these players shouldn't have been there. Like we
But he
talked,
played well.
he played well, but he did make some costly turnovers at times. Like I said, I think the biggest hit was not having Charlie McAvoy just because he was the biggest physical defender out there. A lot
Well,
of these,
Slavin helped too. Jacob Slavin was great.
he's probably the best defensive player. He might have been. He saved the team. He saved us from going down basically 5-3 at one point. Some of those games. So without him, it would have been a total blowout. To be honest, there's a couple of netters that would have got in. Talk about the Rangers players. I don't know what's going on with them. They just don't look right. It just I my other question is is Austin Matthews ever going to step up in the spotlight?
Oh boy.
Is he just a guy who hides in McDavid's shadow, or is he just some guy who's just? I got even ask Leaf fans: is he ever going to bring his best to help Team USA or the Maple Leafs win a championship? I'm just not seeing it. I
So,
don't also a true
oh, go ahead.
captain in Team USA yet. I don't see anyone. I see potentially the Kachucks, but their physical presence. I see them as like a true like a Sidney Crosby or a McDavid kind of leader. That when the lights are bright, they're going to show up and bring the team with them. I'm not seeing that from anyone Team USA, unless you think otherwise.
Okay, no, this is great. I'm glad you brought this up. I almost brought it up in my last little spiel there, but I was like, I'll save that, and then you brought it up. So great. Um, yeah, a couple thoughts on this. First thing, um, you also brought up McDavid in your question. So going into this tournament, I would say, especially north of the border, of our border, the two biggest stars in this tournament were Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid.
Correct.
And Connor McDavid had a tremendous postseason last year, but he will be remembered for winning the Conn Smythe, but not winning Game 7 for the Oilers.
Correct.
Similarly, if you wanted to point out another North American born star in this tournament that our neighbors to the north had their eyes on, it was Mitch Marner. And Mitch Marner, teammate of Austin Matthews for Toronto, they played on USA Canada. They played on opposite sides in this tournament. And Marner was largely able, once you put him with
Someone else.
once you put him with McDavid and Crosby and McKinnon, as opposed to Nylander, Tavares, and Matthews, you saw Mitch Marner latch himself to winners and end up winning this tournament. And he had the game-winning goal against Sweden in their first game. So you put Mitch Marner with winners, and Mitch Marner latches himself on and wins something. You put Austin Matthews, who is the most skilled American-born player right now in the league. He did play a pretty good 200-foot game in the games against Canada, both on Saturday in Montreal and then last Thursday and then Thursday in Boston. So like he did play a good 200-foot game. But to
Yeah.
your earlier point, that's why you brought Larkin and Kyle Connor onto the team. You brought Austin Matthews onto the team to score in overtime when he's standing right in front of Jordan Binnington with the puck on his stick. He's That's why Austin Matthews is on your team. That's why he's your captain. He's supposed to be that guy, the guy that McDavid was for the Canadians on Thursday. Canadians with an A and S. That's what Matthews is supposed to be for us. And I should have known better, Kyle.
Mhm.
Austin Matthews in the Garden in a do or die game in Boston. There was no way that clown was going to show up in when the lights were brightest, when it mattered most, when he had the puck on his stick right in front of Jordan Binnington, who, by the way, Jordan Binnington returns to the scene of the crime. In America, we have a clause in our Constitution called double jeopardy, which means you can't be charged for the same crime, or excuse me, tried for the same crime twice. Well, he returned to the scene of the crime in Boston, where he won a game 7 for the St. Louis Blues
Mhm.
and won the Four Nations face-off for Canada. So that had a lot to do with it too. But yeah, Austin Matthews, I, I don't have anything. I don't have anything to say. Like he's gonna be on the team, obviously, as long as
Correct.
he's in the league, because he's one of the faces of the league, and he's probably the third or fourth most powerful, popular player in the league. He's on the cover of video games, and he's in commercials, and he plays for the Leafs. But yeah, if I'm a Leafs fan, on one hand, I'm like, wow, you put Marner with people who know how to win and he wins. You ask Matthews to basically do what he's done his whole career and he still can't do it, which is Matthews was on a team with good players, the Kachucks, Larkin, Jake Gensel, and he still couldn't get it done. So
So
I don't
here's
know.
here's my question now. Now that Mitch Marner's found success playing with others, does this tempt him in the offseason to potentially go somewhere that has a better chance of winning playing with better successful players?
Yeah, you and I
So
talked about this
now,
beforehand, before the Four Nations. I think Mitch Marner hung out in a locker room with a bunch of Canadian guys, a bunch of guys from around the league, right? I'm just thinking about that team. Like Cirelli plays for the Lightning. There's a lot of Lightning players on that Canadian roster. You had Hagel, Cirelli, Braden Point.
Jake Getzel's riding the bus back,
Yeah,
crying.
yeah, you saw that. Did you see that meme? Yeah, that was hilarious. But if I'm Mitch Marner, I don't know how much cap space the Lightning have. Do you want to go head to head with these Kachucks all the time in the Atlantic Division? Do you want to stay in the Atlantic Division and stick it to the Maple Leafs? Go join. You don't have to get new equipment, just a new jersey. They're still blue and white. So, would a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning contemplate getting Mitch Marner in there? What about some of these other teams um, that might be interested in Mitch Marner, where he may have been able to make a connection? Colorado just shipped out their right wing at the trade deadline. They're in need of a right shot winger. Mitch Marner would look pretty good on a team with Nathan McKinnon. Just pointing that out. So like, if I'm Mitch Marner, I'm not married to the Toronto fan base that's treated me like garbage, um, my whole career. I'm not selling out for them. I'm with you, Kyle. If I'm him, I look to move in the offseason unless the Maple Leafs put an offer in front of me I can't refuse financially.
Yeah, I mean, besides the money aspect, I think for him, it's at this point, does he choose to think about money or does he choose to think about winning? What's gonna provide him that's Stapleton to be remembered? I guess would be the next step for him.
Yeah. I'm with you. I look at it and I'm like, geez, if I'm him,
I mean, if they don't make it past the second round this year, I don't think he's staying. Like I've been saying, I think he leaves. Now that he's finally tasted success, you know what it's like to win. You get hungry, and if you don't feed that hunger, Austin Matthews hasn't seen what? When's the last time he's seen success?
they've won one round his
Yeah.
whole career.
So there's not much there for him. So I think for him, he's going to go, hey, you know what? Some of these other teams know how to win, as we talked about. Maybe he goes to Vegas. Maybe he goes to Colorado. Maybe he does go down to Florida where he gets stacked onto that Lightning team or potentially joins the Panthers. Maybe he goes down and joins the Canes. The Canes have had much success in the last few years. Just thinking about
Yeah,
where he wants to be at the end of the day, I think is what's going to matter to him. What's going to get the wins.
yeah. I think those are all valid points. Um, Other thoughts of the tournament were from the from like the team construction standpoint was I think I think the Canadian goaltenders, and I hinted at this a little bit with Binnington. I think the Canadian goaltending question was kind of squashed a little bit. You
Yeah.
know, all I heard from the Canadians, and I'm wearing a Moosehead Brewing hat, but like, and I have family up there, so I'm gonna try and be nice to them. But all I heard from them leading up to this tournament was, "Oh my God, our goaltending's terrible. We're gonna be terrible. Our goaltending's terrible." And I'm looking at it, I'm like, your starting goaltenders won a Stanley Cup, and so is your backup.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is 4 games that you have to win. Heck, not even. They only had to win. They really only had to win what? Three?
Three out of four.
3 out of 4. Yeah, we beat them once, but they didn't have to. They didn't have to win more than twice to get to the championship, right?
No.
They had an overtime win and then a regulation win. It's not like you needed somebody to go berserk for 3 months to win a cup, like you do to win a cup. So I'm like, why were we doubting that Binnington and or Hill, and it turned out it was Binnington, needed to get hot for 4 games? Like Bruce Cassidy was on that staff. He knows. I mean, he experienced it. It's like I, I don't get why everyone is so worried. I was not. I was like, I knew that United States had the edge in goal against every other team. I thought that even Swayman, who was the worst goaltender on the United States of the three, was still probably better than the other half, maybe less two guys. Maybe Allmark and you say Saros possibly were better than Swayman, maybe Binnington, of course, now. So, but like, it wasn't like the United States clearly had an edge, but it wasn't like Canada was a bunch of scrubs. I mean, these guys are champions.
Correct. They know how to win, and I think that's what they played in their favor. They know guys who would play at the perfect time, perfect place. It just aligned for them. They knew what they can get out of George Binnington out of 4 games. They knew what they would get. So they played it smart. I mean, Team USA had options. Canada really was a battle of who was going to be the best at the time. And I think it's because Jordan Binnington's been in these big situations already. They put him there. I mean, look at it. Hellebuck hasn't been in these kind of situations. I mean, the Jets lay goose egg every single year when they go to the playoffs. Maybe this year it'll change. Swayman just hasn't looked right this year. Jake Onger is Jake Onger. He just also they just don't come. He just comes up short once again. Playoff time. The who guy who doesn't. The one guy who's won a Stanley Cup.
Right, exactly. Exactly. It's like the US guys all have played well in spurts in their career. Like Hellebuck's a multiple time Vezina winner.
Yeah.
Swayman had a great playoff run. Oettinger has looked really good in his young career. But like Canada's guys had won Stanley Cups. Like no other goaltending group in the
No.
whole tournament could say that.
No.
So like I just didn't understand when they were freaking out over their goaltending situation. I'm like, guys, you just need him to be good for 4 games. It's like even when we beat them last Saturday, there was an empty net goal and there was a really gritty goal, and then there was by Larkin, and then there was the softy goal from Gensel, and that was like really the only bad goal I thought he
Yeah.
gave up the whole tournament. Like he didn't look amazing in the second period against Sweden in their first game, but like they still won that game. Like he was gonna give you a chance to win.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I
first
didn't
game.
understand that criticism by them at all. And we turned out to be right about that too when we said that you shouldn't take them lightly.
No, you can't. A team that where hockey was founded, you can't take them lightly.
No, and you can't take those goalies lightly. Even if they had gone with Hill, I still would have said the same thing.
You can't take the thing is for goaltending, and they're hot. They're hot, especially if they've won before. They know always how to perform in big time situations. I mean, you can look back in history of who has shown up. I mean, you could talk about when the USA used to have Miller at their star goaltender as USA's pride and joy, but that was not going to stop against like a Martin Brodeur, who's won multiple Stanley Cups and multiple gold medals. So like it was never going to work out.
Or even Roberto Luongo,
Yeah,
who like we joke about him in Boston because we stopped him from winning a cup, but he was still a guy who had been in the postseason year after year after year after year. The Jets guys around Hellebuck in his career have been good, and they've had good teams and they've had bad teams. They've had good teams and they've had bad teams. And sometimes Hellebuck has overcome that and been awesome and won the Vezina and led them to the playoffs. And there's been other years like 2023 where they don't make the playoff. So meanwhile, Ottinger's the same thing. He's very young. Swayman's very young still. Thatcher Demko, if he had been in there, he's also very young. Um, Dustin Wolf in the future, he's going to be young. So the United States has youth, but I always thought Canada had the experience in that, and that turned out to be true. Um, do you have any other thoughts on the roster construction for the U.S. and Canada, or what do you think? What do you think could have made the four nations face off better? Because I do think it was a great tournament that delivered.
To make it better, the only thing I'd like to see is them include some other nations. I think that they expand. So as I talked about before, even the podcast here, including Russia, because Russia's team would be disgusting this year. We could potentially say that they might have won the whole thing if they were in it. And Germany, maybe you instead make it 4 nations, you make it 6 nations. maybe just keep improving upon that because I think the talent for the NHL is more worldly spread than it is, for example, for like the NBA. I don't think it's as worldly spread talent wise.
Yeah, like you certainly don't have the North American talent pool. So you already have two countries right there. The NBA doesn't have that. MLB doesn't have that. Maybe they have that with the Caribbean.
Yeah.
But the talent pool on this side of the globe is already so strong on hockey. Then not to mention Europe, you talked about Finland and Sweden, Norway as well,
Yeah.
Germany. Um, Norway not so much anymore, but like it's really now it's the Czech Republic or
Yeah.
Czechia as it's known now, Germany, Russia of course, Ukraine and Belarus sometimes, Switzerland sometimes, um, Slovakia occasionally, most of the time, but that's really the group you're looking at when you look at hockey. Some Latvia and um, and Lithuania have had good teams once in a while. Latvia upset Canada at the World Juniors,
Mm-hmm.
for example. So yeah, there's hockey all over the northern hemisphere that can be that can be tapped for a tournament like this. I think the challenge with this one was they needed all 23 guys to be under NHL contract.
Correct.
Um, and it drops off quite considerably. There's only one other country that can do that. That wasn't included, and that's of course Russia. But we know with all of things going on there, they were not going to be invited. Um, so yeah, you could certainly have Germany or Switzerland or the Czech Republic, Czechia involved, but they would have to fix the rules so that AHL or possibly non North American league players could be involved. Uh, the other thing I wanted to throw out at you in this discussion was, do you think qualification, because they're going to do this again in 2028? Do you think qualification for the World Cup of Hockey, as it will be known in the future, not the Four Nations face-off, would be best served if you take gold, silver, and bronze from the Olympics, plus the next five best countries from the Olympics before, which will be the Olympics in a year, if that makes sense? And that's who qualifies, rather than have the NHL get in the business of editorializing who gets to come like it's an invitational. If
Ooh.
they just treat the Olympics like a qualification, because as long as you're going to have best on best in the Olympics, it's going to be the same teams roughly.
Yeah.
Like, and by teams, I mean makeup of the team. Because what I don't like is when they use the IIHF World Championships
Mhm.
as a measuring stick, when those are made up of like not the same people that are going to be at the Olympics or the World Cup, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, the only thing, like I said, you brought up before, or just brought up, is that the issue of is the team going to stay the same by the time 5 years or 4 years go by? Is it going to be?
Well, it will only be two. So like for example, we do the Olympics next year in 2026, and then they're
Yeah.
going to do this again in 2028 with and call it the World Cup of Hockey, and it will be played in North America on our rinks. And you're going to have to pick if they don't do my model, they're going to have to editorialize or find some sort of qualification measure to pick eight countries. And it will only have been 2 years since the Olympics, and really less than that by the time they put the team together, that I think the Olympics would be a good measuring stick.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it would be a good measuring stick. Take the top 8 teams that move on forward from that Olympics and can decide. That's how you get into the qualifications. Maybe they should make that relevant because then it would add more passion for the playing of the Olympics. Not saying there isn't already enough passion for it. It just adds more incentive,
Yeah.
I think.
And what I would do is put the eight, take, let's say the eight countries. I do not have the rankings in front of me. I'm just going to guess that in a year from now, the eight countries that are going to be the best eight are going to be the USA, Canada, Sweden, Finland, Russia, if they're allowed. Big if.
Yeah.
Uh, they may not be. Um, so they might have to make an exception for that if they want Russia in 2028. But let's just say they're in. Then you're looking at probably Czechia, Germany, and Switzerland.
Yeah.
So those eight. You break them up into two groups of four in 2028. That's only 3 years from now. Then you have, one group that's call it USA, Germany, Switzerland, and Canada. And then the other group you have Finland, Sweden, Russia, and the Czech Republic. And now you've got 4-on-4. Take the two best teams from those groups once they all play each other. Now you've got the final four, and then you play two semifinals and then a third place game.
Yep.
That's the only model that's gonna work, I think.
No, I agree. It should be the only model that works. I mean, but we're not in charge of the NHL, so we have no say. Maybe they'll take your advice here and promote you.
They should, I'll do it for free. Just kidding. Don't say that. No, no, I won't. I won't. I'll do it. Give me 100 grand. I'll do it. 100 grand a year. I'll do it. I'll organize all the international tournaments for you if you pay me 100 grand a year. Just at Gary Bettman at Marty Walsh. Um, yeah, and I guess my only other point on this now that we've talked about for a little bit, man, is like I just don't want the NHL to get into the business of editorializing international play
Mm-hmm.
and being like, oh, well, we're gonna pick which countries come this year. Like I don't think they really had a choice
No,
because the union wanted NHL guys in the tournament because they wanted a piece of the pie, because they wanted a seat at the table. All right, so the union was involved. They couldn't bring Russia, and you only had four countries left to choose from. I think if they had their druthers, they would have made it a bigger tournament. And so you shouldn't fault them for this. That was the big, David Pasternak's salty about it. But, with all due respect, the Czechs would have probably wouldn't have won a game because I'm just maybe they would have beat Sweden or Finland, but like they're right now there weren't enough NHL players to even
correct.
fill the team. So it wouldn't have looked good. Uh and they're a great hockey country and they're competitive every year. They won the World Championships a few years ago. I'm not saying they're not respectable, but in this tournament it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked out for them. So I want them to be included in the Olympics, but I think for this tournament it kind of had to be the way it was. Now, Russia. We talked about Russia. Obviously there's the whole political thing going on. They're in the middle of a war. We hope that gets ended. I think that goes without saying. Russia, from a hockey standpoint, assuming they're not punished continually, you know, do you think the Russians, had they been in this tournament, and if they're in the Olympics a year from now, bode better against Canada than the United States?
I would think so. I think they absolutely would, just because one, they also have lots of veteran players on that team. Plus, as we talked about off the show, who do you start in net for that team? Like, it's just they have four goaltenders. That would be a starter on any team. I don't know who you pick. I don't know. You've got the grade eight there. You've got
Malkin,
Malkin. You've got so many.
Panarin, Kucherov.
See, like it's just I don't know. It'd be the. I think it'd be, to be honest. I mean, I think it'd be another great game against Team Canada. I don't even know if Team USA could potentially compete with that Russia team. To be honest, I think they're just well too balanced. I mean, their top six are going to be same as Canada's, but end of the day, I just don't think anyone will be able to beat Russia's team based on talent alone.
Well, as we learned in 1980, it's not always about talent. Sorry, you put that one on a T for me. Uh, well, hey, look, in 2014, United States beat Russia in a shootout. We all remember TJ Oshie. That American team, if you look back, that, with all due respect, was not a very, and same with 2010, was those American teams were not as talented as they are now.
No.
Um, like Zach Parise was one of their best forwards. Of course, the Devil. You had Jamie Langenbrunner
Yep.
was the captain, and then later on you had like Brooks Orpik and Justin Abdelkader, and Patrick Kane was one of the best players, but you didn't have the center depth that you have now with
No.
you had Pavelski and Kessler. but the center depth that you have now with Eichel and Matthews and Larkin and Hughes, uh, and Ryan Leonard, who's going to be probably a top five pick. Sorry, he was a top five pick. He's probably going to be a Calder candidate next year for the Capitals. Like you have all that depth in the forward group. So like I don't hate the United States chances in the future against a Russian team because, you know, I do think if you're playing in a World Cup of hockey on American and Canadian ice surfaces that are smaller, that
Yeah.
helps us. Um, but yeah, the goaltending, as you point out, that's insane. The goaltending is incredible for uh for Russia to have Bobrovsky and Shesterkin and Vasilevsky and Varlamov and the kid from BU who's up and coming. Like it's insane how much talent they have. So I hope for the sport and for the world um, that they get included because I heard someone say one time that not inviting the Russians to invitational hockey tournament is like not inviting the Dominicans to a baseball tournament. Like outside of our country and Canada, like you point like the Russians invented the sport as it's played now. Like the European influx led by the Czech Republic and Russia and Slovakia that happened in the 80s and 90s changed the NHL, made it more open and scoring. Um, like the best players to play the game, a lot of them are American and Canadian, but like the Russians and the Europeans in general had a lot to do with the expansion of the NHL to be as skilled as it is now. And so, Kyle, with that, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Alex Ovechkin's closing in on Wayne Gretzky. I believe he's 13 goals away, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he had a hat trick the other night.
Right, that certainly helps. So with 20 something games left to go, it's in and the Capitals continuing to be the best team in the Eastern Conference. It's believable that he could do it before the end of the regular season. Now, I want you to name for me, if you could, the best players in our generation and stop when you get to Alex Ovechkin.
Oh gosh.
And by our generation, I think we decided off camera that's 2000 to now.
Yes. So better. So you're saying name better players than him of our generation? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking you to name, if there are any, better players than Ovi in our generation. Who are they?
Oh gosh. I mean, to be honest, there's not many. There's not many that I can think of based on pure talent alone. Um, I'm gonna start with our all-time, pride just above him, Sidney Crosby. Sidney Crosby's been there. He's done that. Was he got 3 titles to his name, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Yep, he won a Stanley Cup in '09, 16, and 17.
after that, maybe Nicholas Lindstrom and Pavel Zacha.
I think you
Uh,
mean Pavel Datsyuk, but yes. Pavel Zacha's
yes.
good. He's not that good.
Joe, I think he'd be up there with the number of cups he's gotten. Same with what's his name?
Did you say Joe
Uh,
Sakic?
yes,
Okay.
yes, and then Patrick Wall, all-time legend, one of the greatest. After that, maybe Martin Brodeur. I think that'd be pushing it with all those guys. Besides that, I think it's Patrick Kane, but I don't think he has the
Yeah.
stats. He has the titles though.
All right.
But
So here's where I'm going. You put together a great list. And I'm going to cheat a little bit and remove goaltenders
okay.
because because yes, Waugh and Brodeur specifically come to mind. Um, but I'm also going to remove. well, maybe I won't. I'm gonna remove like Mario Lemieux, for example, because yes, he played into the 2000s. Same thing with Jaromir Jagr. They played into, I mean, they played well.
Yeah,
Jagr played well into the 2000s, but like to me, he began his career in like the late 80s, early 90s, if I don't miss
correct.
remember that. So it's got, like kind of hard to like kind of call him my generation. So I'm gonna stick to guys who basically started or ended or continued their career since 2000 as best I can. And number one, I'm going Crosby, and I'm ending there. Crosby's got the three cups, and he's got the two gold medals, the Four Nations face-off. I believe he's the only one to go triple gold or to
Yes.
win a world championship. Well, not the only one because, but he's one of the only ones, I should say, to go triple gold, Stanley Cup, World Championships, Olympics. The other guy I thought about in this conversation was Jonathan Toews,
Mm,
multiple Selke awards, won an Olympic gold medal in 10 and 14, won three Stanley Cups as well. The issue with Toews is he's missed so much time the last 3 or 4 years, and I think he's only 37 or 38. So had he have played, he would have tacked on some more points. But he had a really bad injury, and I mean he kind of pulled an Aaron Rodgers, like he's out in the woods somewhere. I'm not really sure where he is. Um, but Jonathan Toews is in that conversation. Patrick Kane is in that conversation as a skater. Um, but I mean it kind of starts to wind down from there. I hate to be biased toward forwards. Um, Joe Sakic, a great player as well. Uh, Joe Thornton, a great player as well, but didn't have the winning. I don't think he ever won a Stanley Cup.
he's made it, just never won it.
Right? In fact, he lost to Crosby. So Pavel Datsyuk was a great call out for sure.
Hmm.
He was a staple on those Red Wings teams. Henrik Zetterberg, Peter Forsberg, some good players in that sort of European group from that era. But to me, it's Crosby and it's Ovechkin, and it's kind of a gap after that. Now, McDavid, in fairness, we could have this conversation about him, but it's very premature for McDavid. You do know what's wild about um, McDavid is he ranks third all time in points per game already. Yeah. Uh, but points per game is a proportional stat. Um,
Correct.
so, does that last throughout his whole career? Because he's played like half of the games. I think number one is Gretzky and number two is Yager. Yager as a result of playing for so long, and Gretzky as a result of being so good for so long. But Ovechkin's top 10 as well. Um, uh, and he's played a lot of games in his career, and he's won
Yeah.
a Stanley Cup. So I'm going Crosby, and then I'm going Ovechkin. I,
Okay.
I don't. I think that's where in our lifetime watching hockey, I think that's what the conversation starts to end.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to break Wayne Gretzky's record. I don't think there's going to be any other being that will break Ovechkin's record once he breaks Wayne.
Well, I think what helped Ovechkin and Crosby and Yager, for that matter, and Gretzky and all these all-time greats is that they started in the league when they were 18 or 19 years old.
Yeah, they stay.
So, if you pick a guy like Macklin Celebrini or Connor Bedard, just because they're the two most recent number one overall picks, and they're both under the age of 20 still, if they put together the kind of career, longevity-wise, in this sport, they could get to a point like that. McDavid is the same thing. I think McDavid is our age, and he's already been in the league 10 years.
It's really been 10 years.
Well, let's see. He was drafted in 15, so call that 9 years. So
Yeah.
9 years. Yep. Same thing with Eichel. So these guys are drafted really young, and that has a lot to do with it. But yeah, I mean, in our whole life, Kirk, tell me if I'm wrong. It's pretty much been Crosby, Ovechkin, back and forth as like the best player in the league up until McDavid, and then it was sort of like a consensus McDavid's the best player in the league um, discussion. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair just because Crosby and Ovechkin got older, so they're not as top tier,
Yeah.
but still they were the top tier for what? Almost 2 decades.
Right.
So for them to be doing that at such a young age and still be the face of the NHL for majority of it, it's still very incredible for any one of those calibers. I mean, kind of the ageless wonder like Jaromir Jagr, been around forever in the hockey league. I think he's just retired this past year from playing. And what he played for 30 seasons, not including like with the NHL. So just gotta also be smart with how you keep yourself healthy. I mean, both of those players also made sure that they were staying healthy throughout the season. I mean,
Yeah, very, very few times, if you go back and look, like I'll pull up Crosby's game log from his career because I believe this to be true. Very few times did he miss a lot of games. So, starting in 2013 when they made the Eastern Conference Finals, um,
yeah,
he played in 80, 77, 80, 75, 82, 79. Then he got injured during the COVID year, and then he had 55 out of, I believe that was a 60 game season in 2021. So 55 out of 60. And then since then, he's gone 69, 82, 82.
yeah,
So, and I'm sure if you go back at Ovechkin, I know he was hurt for a little bit this year, but you look at his games played log throughout his career, starting in 2005 when he was a rookie, 81, 82, 82, 79, 72, 79, 78, 48 during the lockout year, uh, which is, I believe, they only played 48 games that year anyway. Then you had 78, 81, 70, 82, 82, 81, again during the COVID years, 68 and 45. And then since the COVID years, 77, 73, 79. So,
yeah,
like, he's almost never, when there's been an 82 game season, missed time for
correct.
longer than like 10 games.
Well, I think
That I
I
think
think
that's the difference.
I think this year's the longest for him because he had a broken bone, but still came back. I think it was 6 weeks after.
Yeah, so with 41 games played this year and only like 20 or so left, he's not gonna crack 65 this year, I don't think.
No,
Um, which would be a career low for him in qualifying years. But even with that, he's got 46 points in 41 games at the ripe old age of,
35, 36.
oh, older than that. I'm looking at his date of birth and trying to do math in my head, which is never a good idea.
What's the year?
He is 39
Oh my
and
god.
160 days. He's
Okay.
so old it was the USSR when he was born.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Speaking of Russian greats. Uh, yeah. So just an incredible career for him. And you look at McDavid. I'm just gonna pull him up and read his for the sake of good content for everybody, of course. So you look at Connor McDavid's game log throughout his career. As a rookie, he only played 45. But since then, he's gone 82, 82, 78. And then the COVID years, 64 and 56. And then since COVID, 80, 82, 76.
I mean, he's on pace.
You're right. Right. That's what greatness is. In life, that's my parting message to everybody. Greatness in life, you don't have to be the best every single day. But if you show up every single day, chances are you're going to end up being one of the best.
Yep, you ain't wrong.
Boom. All right, Kyle. What are we looking for um, the rest of the week in the NHL? Do you think in a week or so we're gonna know who the? Give us a parting thought. Do you think we're gonna know in a week or so who the buyers and sellers are truly gonna be?
I think we kind of already know who the buyers and sellers are, just a little bit. Uh, I
Yeah.
th- I think right now, I can kind of go by the division. I'll do seller and buyer. I think right now, for the Metropolitan, I think the Devils and Rangers are both buyers. For sellers, I would probably say Pittsburgh or definitely. Oh, it's got to be Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh and the Islanders are probably my two. Um, I'm trying to remember who is what are the other divisions. I'm drawing a blank at the moment.
Well, there's Atlantic,
Uh
Pacific, and
I'll go.
Central.
I think I'll go Atlantic. I think. Let's see. I think the Bruins are going to be sellers right now, just because the injuries they're having. I think it's just the best for them to be sellers and bring up some of their youth, get some cap space, get some picks. Picks are always great. I think the buyers are going to be the Senators. I think the Senators are going to be the ones who make the move to make the playoffs. As we just talked about before, Brady Tkachuk is bringing that energy from Team USA to that Senators team. Out west, this is a tough one because I don't think anyone's truly a buyer technically from the top seed. I think they're trying to stay where they're at. I don't think really anyone from the lower seeds in the West have anything to really sell, if that makes sense. They don't
Yep.
have,
Yep. I think like Dallas and Colorado, maybe Edmonton would love to add a piece if they can, but I don't think there's gonna be much for them to choose from.
no, there's not much out there. At least, like I said, I think the East is more interesting, just also because I think the Canes, the trade they made, what's his name? I don't think he's not performing too well, and I think they're thinking about getting rid of him again. So
Yeah, I don't buy that. But yeah, I see
they're
people were
talking
really
about,
hot about Mikko Rantanen for like a couple Fridays ago when the trade happened, but since then they've kind of been squirrely. Um, yeah, I don't think they're trading him again, but I could be wrong. More than likely that guy's trying to play well so that he can get paid in July. But yeah, I agree with your assessment. It's gonna be a lot of fun, man.
yeah,
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
as long as I can watch the Rangers fall apart here, I'll be happy. That's all I like
Yeah.
to see.
Well, it comes down to who do you trust in the Eastern Conference, right? This is my parting message. Who do you trust? You trust the Blue Jackets now that Marchenko's back? Maybe they're going to get healthier.
Yeah,
Do you trust the Red Wings to stay good? Do you trust the Bruins to hang around as long as possible and possibly sneak in? Do you trust the Senators to finally meet expectations? How about the Lightning to maintain their excellence in playoff consistency? It really comes down to who do you trust? Do you trust the Devils? Do you trust the Islanders? Do you like all over the Eastern Conference? Who do you
I think
trust?
I think the only teams you can really trust right now in the East would probably be Washington. The
Florida, Toronto?
That's really it. I would say those are the top. Those are the teams I would at least trust. Maybe the Lightning because they've been there, done that before, but that's about it.
Yeah. It's going to be
But,
an easier path for an Atlantic Division team to make the playoffs than a Metro Division team
correct.
because the gaps are just a little bit bigger. So, yeah, we have a lot to look forward to. We will be back post trade deadline. The trade deadline is March 7th. We'll be back post trade deadline to break that all down and see where everything shakes out heading into the regular season's final month. We'll get another weather report from Kyle. Maybe we won't have any snow by then. We'll see. We appreciate you tuning into this episode. We went a little long, but we dove into a lot of great topics. You can like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. But until next time, he's Kyle Diesel. I'm Will Highland. It's been Odd Man Rush. Have a great rest of your week.